This is Beverly Tomasian, and today we're going to be talking about the impact of adverse childhood experiences on health. And we're going to look at a personal story of resilience and hope. And I'm really honored to be teaching and sharing this information because I think it has such a profound impact on our daily lives and the care that we provide people with diabetes. And I'm just so happy you're here listening today, whether live or recorded. I really do appreciate your willingness to come explore this content because, just looking at the title, it might be scary to come be present with this information. So I just really want to recognize that. And I have no disclosures or conflicts of interest to share. And today we're going to be talking about adverse childhood experiences in individuals with diabetes and, outside of diabetes. We'll look at the relationship between ACE scores and risk of future health complications. We'll look at a person-centered approach to fostering resilience and self-care for people who've experienced toxic stress or still are experiencing it. And then I think really important is to leave with a message of hope that, even though people have experienced trauma, there's hope for healing. We can be a part of that healing just by recognizing it. And there's different interventions we can provide that are very helpful for that person who's living through trauma or has lived through trauma. And that is how I want to end this day. So we're going to kind of just take a journey through the impact of trauma and how, as diabetes specialists, we can make a difference. And I think we can make a really big difference. Now, thinking about diabetes, just the pathophysiology alone, right? The ominous octet is so crazy. Or if you have an immune-mediated diabetes. So you've got all this complexity with diabetes. You've got to take all these meds and check your blood sugar, and you're on a pump and a CGM. But you know what? That's just not the end of the story. There's all these other factors, psychological factors. Where do they live? What are their access to resources? Do they live in a place where they feel safe, or do they live in a place where there's hostility, maybe microaggressions, maybe there's racism in where they live or their place of work. Maybe there's other social, behavioral, or emotional issues impacting this person. So not only do they have their diabetes to manage, they've got all this other life situation to navigate. It's really hard. And so when we work with people with diabetes, we recognize that. They live in a context of their life, and we want to address that. And I'd like to kick it off with this story. It just happened a few months ago in my clinic, where I was talking to this gal on the phone, and I was speaking in Spanish to her, and my Spanish is okay. I wouldn't say it's really awesome, but I'm working on it. And she was telling me about her diabetes and blood sugar checks. And then we were just talking, and she goes, you know what? I've been falling lately. And I go, what? You're falling? And I go, well, how are your blood sugars? Are they ever below 70? And she's like, no, they're running, 80 to 180. They never go below 80. And I'm like, oh, how's your blood pressure? And she's like, oh, my blood pressure is fine. When I check it, it's never below 130/80. And in the clinic, I looked at her history. It was never low. And I was like, this is so weird. Why is she falling? So I'm asking her in different ways, trying to make sure it's not a language issue. Am I not understanding this? And then I get our MA, and I'm like, okay, talk to this gal, see if I'm understanding what she's saying. And so they bring her actually in physically for an appointment to evaluate what's happening. And it is true. She was saying, I am falling. But really, what she was saying is the life is falling out of me. Her teenager who lives in her house is using drugs. And every time she sees her teenager using drugs and she's trying to talk to him, she's not losing consciousness, but she's falling. It's an emotional response that her body cannot bear to see this happening. So it just decides to not participate in holding her up anymore. And I think this really struck me hard that, wow, how powerful our mind-body connection is. And, when I was watching the Olympics, we talked about this so much with Simone Biles, and Simone Biles is so courageous. Now, I don't know if y'all know this about Simone, but if you remember with Larry Nassar, he was a sexual predator and a gym doctor, and he sexually molested many of the gymnasts, and there was a huge trial, but Simone was one of them. And she had really tried not to deal with it. Like, she has pushed down that abuse, and just lately she's been kind of recognizing and dealing with it. But she, during the Olympics, as you know, she got the twisties where she couldn't get her body to do what she wanted it to do. And she said something very important. I didn't quit. My mind and body are simply not in sync. I don't think you realize how dangerous this is on the hard competition surface, nor do I have to explain why I put health first. And then her last few words were so powerful. She goes, physical health is mental health. So her physical well-being was completely tied to her mental well-being or mental distress. And when the two are out of sync, we are out of sync. And she said it so simply: mental health is physical health, and physical health is mental health. It's kind of interesting that we separate them out. But I was thinking about this today, like, if you all know, if you have GI distress and or I don't know, you've bloating or gas or nausea, it totally affects our mental health. I mean, it goes right up the vagus nerve to our brain, and we're getting all this information. So I think that what we're talking about here is so critical, because as diabetes specialists, we recognize that mental and physical health are interrelated. And I'll just tell you, like, for a long time, I would just say, oh, these symptoms of, let's just say, neuropathy, oh, those are physical, it's nerve death. But now we're understanding that we can provide coaching to people and help with neuroplasticity and maybe building new neural pathways in the mind to help diminish pain. So I think it actually offers us opportunities to help people in new and novel ways, knowing that we can help with coaching, counseling, meditation, and other things to help develop these new neural pathways to maybe deal with physical manifestations of trauma and other things that have happened. Because as diabetes specialists, we're trying to get to well-being. And I love this word. This is from the ADA Standards of Care. I think it's standard, gosh, I want to say 3 or 4. But well-being is a goal of care. And how do we get to well-being? And well-being includes, of course, psychological and social health, right? Addressing those. And I'm thrilled that we're moving in that direction. And we certainly know that individualizing our approach to care is important, because many of the people, especially with the pandemic, are dealing with food insecurity, cognitive dysfunction, social isolation, and elevated blood sugars can definitely impact cognition. And then we have mental illness. We know that it's 2 to 3 times higher rates of diabetes and schizophrenia and people living with bipolar. So mental illness and diabetes are correlated. People with HIV, certain medications can cause hyperglycemia. And then, of course, history of trauma. And then we have all the health disparities on top of that: ethnicity, racism, culture, sex, socioeconomic status, LGBTQ populations, who oftentimes don't seek out medical care because they feel uncomfortable in the places where medical care is provided, maybe not seen or recognized. So this is right in the standards of care that we want to start addressing this. And that's why I want to really talk about trauma. So let's talk about our case study. We have a 57-year-old arrives at the hospital having seizure-like episodes after complaining of heart arrhythmia. So having a lot of palpitations, arrhythmias at home, says, I don't know, we just have to go to the hospital. I'm not feeling good. And then at the ER starts having like seizure-like symptoms. So the neurologist comes and says, wow, these are seizures. We need to get her on some anti-seizure medications. And then she's admitted to the hospital for monitoring. They do an EEG, lots of other tests to rule out anything else. But then the neurologist changes after 3 days of this person being in the hospital. And the new neurologist comes in and goes, I don't think these are epileptic type seizures. I don't think these is a brain transmission issue. I think these are psychogenic seizures. So they transfer this person to a teaching hospital where they can monitor them 24 hours a day. And when this person's having the seizures, there is no chemical change in the brain. It's a psychogenic seizure caused by or elicited by trauma. And this is interesting because a seizure is a body's way of expressing what the mind and mouth cannot. So this person has been holding in this trauma for so long, and it needed to come out. It needed to be expressed. And the only way it could express itself is through the seizure. Well, let's learn some more about this person. Had a stroke at 53. They didn't ever find out why. This person has some other like autoimmune health issues. This person though, like if you met them, they're very like cheerful, upbeat. They walk 7 miles a day. They look healthy. They look fine. Like you would never think anything is wrong with this person. Has a super supportive family, husband, runs a company, loves what she does. But wait, what about her childhood? When that neurologist saw the seizures, no one asked, how was your childhood? Have you had a lot of trauma? And as we find out later, childhood trauma and psychogenic seizures are very correlated. So as you might have guessed by now, the person in this case study is me. And I decided to be vulnerable and share my story because I think a lot of other people that we meet, that we provide care to, that we are friends with, that we are family of, have also experienced trauma. And that includes all of you listening in here too. And this trauma, we compartmentalize, we hold it in, we're not going to deal with it or talk about it, but it affects us. It has to come out in some way. And it comes out in surprising ways. And I think about this a lot, and we'll talk about this more as we go through the stats, but people with elevated ACE scores or adverse childhood experiences have an increased risk of stroke and heart attack. And so when I say I had a cryptogenic stroke, which means they don't know why, maybe it really isn't. You know, I think about that a lot. So let's talk more about ACEs, because I think, as I've said, with this mind-body connection, we are understanding that childhood trauma and health are totally interrelated. And when you hear the word ACE, it just means adverse childhood experiences. And it's a defined type of experience that has happened to somebody before the age of 18. Now, the thing about adverse childhood experiences is that they're really common. About 1 in 7 children experience childhood abuse and neglect in the last year. It costs a lot of money to our nation. And I'm sure you've heard in the news lately the discovery of children who have not been well taken care of. And during this pandemic, with all the social and financial stressors, children have really, taken the brunt of this. So we want to be aware of that and look for it. Now, this ACE study was initiated with a study by Kaiser and the CDC that was done in 1997. And this researcher team said, let's mail out these questionnaires to 1,700 Kaiser Permanente participants in California. And these were, people who had resources, and a lot of Caucasians, majority of them Caucasians. So they sent out 17,000 asking about very specific early childhood experiences that were adverse. More than 60% had 1 or more, and 18% had 4 or more. And the researchers were pretty shocked about this. So when they looked at the 10 assessment areas for ACEs, they looked at abuse, physical, emotional, sexual. They looked at neglect, physical or emotional, and then household dysfunction, mental illness. Was somebody in the household incarcerated? Was a mother treated violently? Was there substance use or divorce? So as I was saying, over 60% had 1 or more, and 18% said yes to 4 of these, which is pretty profound. I mean, these are intense things to happen to a child. But I want to say, you might say, well, there's lots of other trauma related things that could happen to a kid. Why aren't they there? And yeah, they just chose these 10 so that they had a standardized tool. And this standardized tool seems to be very predictive of future health consequences. So certainly there are other traumas, and traumas can happen after the age 18 that impact our health. Absolutely. But this was for the study. And so here is the adverse childhood experience questionnaire. And it says here, I love the wording they use. And this all comes from ACEs Aware. You could go to acesaware.org and get all this great information. But I want to read some of this to you. Our relationship and experiences, even those in childhood, can affect our health and well-being. Difficult childhood experiences are very common. Please tell us whether you've had any of the experiences listed below, as they may be affecting your health today or may affect your health in the future. This information will help you and your provider better understand how to work together to support your health and well-being. Wow, love that language, right? And so if we're not familiar or comfortable with it, and we want to start providing this ACE screening tool to our participants, and in California and other states now, especially for Medicaid participants, clinics are getting reimbursement for administering the ACEs evaluation and then providing coaching as needed. So you can look at these 10 questions, and this is just yes or no. And this person who's filling this out, and we could have it computerized or we can have it on a tear sheet, they don't have to mark which ones are yes. That's confidential. All we really need to know is their total score. And do you believe these experiences have affected your health? That's such a good question, because it starts people thinking about it. You might not think, I never considered what happened as a kid would affect my physical health as an adult. That only has come later in the last 5 years, even considering that. And that's when I first started hearing about ACEs, making those connections. So lots of times there's a disconnect, but when we read this, we're like, oh, wow, the light bulbs start going off. And I'm going to let you read through all of these and see. Now, each one we say yes to, it's called a dose response. The more we have of these, the more we can say yes to, the higher our chances of having it affect our health as adults. Now, I'm not saying that we are our numbers. So I have all the numbers here, and there's a great page called Number Story. And I want to say something so important again. We are not our number. And some people might have a score of 1 and have so much, it's impacted them so deeply. And some people might have a score of 4, for example, but they had a lot of supportive adults or safe places they could go, and then they might be dealing with it a little bit better. So really important to know that for all of us here. And as I'm going to say to all of you, many of us have experienced childhood trauma. Who goes toward the fire to help put out the fire? We do. We are healthcare professionals for a reason, right? We want to help people. And, maybe some of that reason we want to help others is because we've experienced suffering. I don't know. It's just, and I'm going to say that out loud, but I know for myself, there was a lot of shame in my family. And one of my main missions in life is to help reduce shame. A shame-based life is a very challenging life. So I'm going to talk about shame out loud a lot. And it's okay. It's part of my mission statement, my values. But anyways, so this stuff is hard for us too. And I was trying to find some studies. Do people with ACEs tend to move into the healing professions more often than others? And I couldn't find any studies that just determine that. But I think it's really important to consider for the future, because we need healing too. And we need to, look at this and spend time with it and figure out how can we process this information. So later on, we'll discuss coping and healing strategies. And, just a preview into the end of my story is that, yes, I'm in counseling and I do a lot of hard work with my counselor. It's not easy. Some days I want to run away and I just want to hang up because we do virtual, but I keep going. And so it helps. Now, here's a screening tool, multiple languages. So kind of one of my goals is to say, as diabetes specialists, can we provide this ACE screening tool in our work setting? Is this something we can incorporate into our usual care? And it doesn't happen overnight. I've been to the training and I'm slowly moving toward this with my clients and my clinic. We're trying to get it set up and standardized. But look at all the languages the screening tools are available in, which is amazing. This wasn't here 1 year ago. They've really tried to expand the languages available. And they also have one for kids. So they call the pediatric ACEs and related life events pearls for peds. So you can see, of course, the kid couldn't take this exam. So it's usually the caregiver or the parent would be taking this assessment. But once they get to the teenage year, they can start taking the assessment. So I just want to show you how this one is related. At any point in time since your child was born, has your child seen or been present when the following experiences happened? Please include past and present experiences. Again, just saying how many yeses. Now, this is so instructive. Like if a pediatric clinic provides this to all parents, it's very helpful for them to know what activities or actions or household experiences cause kids to suffer with toxic stress. And then we can have a discussion about how to mitigate that, or counseling or resources or support. It opens the conversation. And the goal here is to really get rid of ACEs. I mean, to decrease the amount of ACEs a child is exposed to would have such huge implications for the health of our country and of adults. Now, the other thing with part 2 of the pearls is this is new, and this is not part of the total score, but this is looking at what's happening in the neighborhood, discrimination, housing, not enough food to eat, separated, or in foster care. Do they live with the parent or caregiver with serious physical illness or disability, or someone who died? And I think this is really responding to the COVID pandemic and crisis. So this is an add-on, which is a great discussion point to have with that family and see what resources can we provide. And so you could be looking at this and saying, oh my gosh, this opens up a whole can of worms. And it actually does. I mean, it can be a big discussion, but it's a discussion that we need to have, because if this is happening, it's so hard for that child to grow and develop and become an adult with, successful coping skills. And also, childhood trauma not only affects their coping skills, it can actually disrupt DNA packaging. It can disrupt the epigenetic tags, and it can alter genetic makeup. If you look at the telomeres in our cells, the longer they are, the healthier, or the younger the cell is. But if the telomeres start getting really short and frazzled, it means that cell health is older. And we look at people with adverse childhood experiences, and it seems like their telomere length is shortened. They have neuroendocrine dysregulation. Now, if you think about diabetes, that makes total sense. So if you have nervous system dysregulation and endocrine system, it certainly has a higher risk of impacting blood sugars. There's altered immune response. They're not as able to fight off infection. And we'll see later, they have higher rates of cancer. So it's not just affecting us emotionally, it's affecting our chemistry, our genetics, our biological functioning in a powerful way, in an unexpected way. And this is what was so shocking to me when I was learning about childhood trauma is, sure, it affects our behavior, right? Maybe we're depressed or we're traumatized, so we don't really move. Maybe we're smoking to self-treat our discomfort, or drinking alcohol, or using drugs, or missing work. Those are all behaviors that are manifestations of ACEs. But the crazy thing is the physical health. The person, I'm going to go down to the bottom line here, more heart disease, cancers, especially lung cancer, more stroke, more COPD, more broken bones. That's so weird. Why would they have more broken bones? But it's just what the data is showing us. And then more diabetes. That's right up our alley. Severe obesity, so extra weight, depression, much higher rates of suicide, and sexually transmitted diseases. People who have undergone adverse childhood experiences have many more unintended pregnancies, fetal death, complication, HIV. So it can put children on a trajectory where they're engaged in more risk-taking behaviors. And this might have to do with a lot of different things, what they were exposed to. Depression, anxiety, traumatic brain injury, fracture and burn, so more accidents happen, more cancer, diabetes, unsafe sex, and their opportunity for education and to advance their life is limited because it might be so hard for them just to focus, to concentrate, to follow through, and complete their education, to get a job that pays well because of this. Now, so this science is even recognized by the CDC. The Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report in 2019 said preventing ACEs could reduce a large number of health conditions, up to 21 million cases of depression, up to 1.9 million cases of heart disease, and 2.5 million cases of overweight or obesity. I mean, this is huge. If we could start addressing ACEs with children and helping set up homes so that they can decrease ACE exposure, we could make a big difference in the future. And it's so important. But what about adults who already have it? Well, we can help them too. Let's take a look at JR. JR is 26 years old with newly diagnosed diabetes, keeps missing appointments. And when you finally get a hold of JR on the phone, they say, "My life is a mess." JR is struggling with addiction, periods of addiction and houselessness, and extra weight in addition to diabetes. Based on this information, what is the most likely barrier to JR engaging in self-care? Is JR struggling with depression? Diabetes distress is at the core of the list of behaviors, grieving and denial of diabetes diagnosis, or is it adverse childhood experiences? What do you all think about this? What would be the best reason, the most likely reason they're not engaging in self-care? All right, thanks for voting, everyone. All right, I'm going to close the poll and share your results. So 84% of you chose the best answer: adverse childhood experiences. And I don't say in here that JR had a really difficult childhood with lots of different issues, but we can see by the behaviors they're manifesting that it certainly seems like they had adverse childhood experience. With depression, I mean, we would hear something like, "Oh, nothing I do gives me pleasure. I don't really want to do anything. I'm feeling down or discouraged." We don't hear that. So I don't really think it's depression. And then diabetes distress. Well, diabetes distress is usually really associated with diabetes related behavior, like hypoglycemia and so forth. Grieving and denial of diabetes. No, don't really see that. But I do see that probably at the core of this is adverse childhood experience based on what they're saying. And, we're going to get people like that. I'm just going to take a little stretch break. We're going to work with people who are missing appointments and don't get their prescriptions refilled. And they're like, oh, when they come in, they're discombobulated, right? And you're wondering what is going on here. And we can imagine what perhaps their childhood was like. And then maybe we give them the ACE screening and say, yeah, how was your childhood? Or sometimes I'll just say to them, how was your childhood? And I really look at their face right away when I ask that and see what scans across their face. And lots of times you can see kind of a look indicating that their childhood was hard. Some people might say, oh my gosh, I had the best childhood. I was like a cheerleader and, I was great. I traveled, whatever. You're like, okay, that's awesome. So but still you might need to do a little more digging if they're struggling. But other times if that person comes in and they're missing appointments, not getting their meds, losing their job, I'm thinking this is deep. There's something bigger happening here than this person doesn't care. Because seriously, I've been doing this for so long and I've really never met anybody who doesn't care. I've met people who are in distress. So that was kind of a little bit of a stretch break. But, when we talk about adverse childhood experience, how do we get there? Well, I was saying that as this dose dependent response, like each stressor adds more. And, when we think about stress, there's three types of stress. And I just think it's good to talk about this briefly, but there's positive stress, like, oh yeah, I got a new job, and you go there and it's hard, and where's everything? And, who do you call for IT help? And where's the, cafeteria, and who am I going to hang out with? I mean, that's a positive stress associated with this new job, a promotion, and so forth. And so over time, it kind of gets better. But we do have a mild increase in our stress hormones or corticosteroids. Now, a tolerable stress. Now, tolerable stresses are things like immigration. So if a person, like I'll just say from me, for example, so I'm born in Canada and my parents moved out to America when I was 2 years old. And yeah, I mean, we speak English in America and Canada. And it's a very similar culture. But the thing was, we were very isolated. It was just the four of us, and there was not a lot of supportive adults that I could personally go and ask for help. So that happens to a lot of immigrants. They might feel isolated. They don't speak the language. They don't know how the system works. It can be very stressful. But what if they have somebody helping them navigate? Oh, you're safe here. Let me show you where to go. That can make the stress tolerable. Another type of stress is natural disasters, and we're seeing a lot more natural disasters now. And I just want to give another example. In the 1971, I survived the Sylmar earthquake. It was a significant earthquake. There was lots, people died, the freeways collapsed, our garage collapsed. And again, if you have a lot of supportive adults to help you through that trauma, or like now we're having floods and storms and earthquakes and fires, a lot of trauma from that. Do we have a safe place to go? And then what about the pandemic? People living, relatives, loved ones with COVID, maybe they recover, or we're hearing about children now getting orphaned. So these stresses then that could have been tolerable and move toward healing in one direction can also go the other direction, which is toward toxic stress. So toxic stress is really hard on our body because, as you know, our flight or fight response is constantly on. So we're having all these stress hormones released. We're, looking around, we're frightened, we're worried, we don't know what's going to happen next. We're ready for action. And this has big impacts on our cellular growth and development, especially as kids. And this prolonged activation of stress response system, especially in the absence of protective relationship, can lead to toxic stress. So when you hear that term toxic stress, it's pretty specific to that. And as adults, that toxic stress that's manifest in our body now can manifest as psychological issues, depression, anxiety, but can also manifest as disease. So this is really, when I saw this slide for the first time and I was, researching this, I was like floored. A person with ACEs, and it says here, if they have 4 ACEs or more, has an odds ratio of double the chance of having heart disease and stroke. ACE increases the risk for 9 out of 10 leading causes of death in the US. Look at this, it increases the odds ratio for diabetes 40%, kidney disease 70%, cancer a doubling, Alzheimer's quadrupling, suicide 37 times more likely. So now let's think about our people with diabetes. They come in to see us, they have diabetes. What else do they have? What's the leading cause of death with diabetes? Heart disease and stroke. Plus, they're higher risk for kidney disease, and people with diabetes are more likely to get breast, liver, pancreatic cancer, and more likely to get Alzheimer's. So, and suicide, honestly, that's why we do that PHQ-9, that depression scale, to see if that person is at risk. So when we're working with people with diabetes, certainly we want to look back in time if it's appropriate, and if we have the screening tool, and explore that. If we're really seeing that person is having a hard time moving forward with self-care, maybe there's a huge obstacle in the way, especially if they are presenting with this emotional distress. But like I said, some people don't don't have emotional distress, or they hide it well, they compartmentalize. Like me, you would never know. I'm so good at just putting it in this little box and hiding it away and going on with my life. That's how I survived all this time. So only by taking the ACE risk test do we know if those are in there and that they need to be addressed. So somebody's asking, will this be available to review? Is it going to be recorded? Yes, it's going to be recorded, and I'm going to post it, and you could share it with anyone you want, because it's free and available to everyone. So now that we kind of established this link between ACEs and physical and emotional health, what can we do about it? And I said earlier, we are not our number. You are not your number. That number just lets us know, it quantifies in some way what has happened. And now with that information, we can start toward healing. But many people don't know about ACEs, and this lack of knowledge leads to significant illness and unimaginable expense, much of which could be averted through awareness, education, and action. That's why I'm so excited you're here. So what can diabetes specialists do? We can identify people who experience toxic stress and take action. We can provide the ACE screening tools part of our intake. Now, you might think, oh my gosh, what if they have a 5 or an 8? What do I do? We acknowledge the results and we provide trauma-informed care. Do we have to fix it? No. Do we listen? Yes. As healthcare providers, let's ask, because trauma can have significant impact on health. What might be traumatic for somebody might not be traumatic for another. People want to compartmentalize pain. But chronic stress associated with trauma can wreak havoc on long-term health. And one of the most important things is just hearing people. And as diabetes specialists, we're so good at that, right? We ask the questions, we listen, we acknowledge. And the act of recognition in itself is healing. By recognizing trauma, we give voice to the unheard. We offer hope for healing, and we participate in breaking the cycle. That's what we want to do, break the cycle. Okay, so let's say you give the ACE assessment. This is like the algorithm for what do you do now? The person has a low risk of 0 to 3 without associated health conditions. We can provide education about ACEs, toxic stress, and resilience, and look for protective factors. We want to encourage protective factors. So that's low risk. But what if they're intermediate risk? That is, they score 1 to 3 or 4 or more, and they have associated health conditions. Over here, with or without associated health condition, we want to provide education about toxic stress, its role in their health, resilience, look for protective factors, figure out a plan, and then link to support services and treatment as appropriate. Unknown risk. Well, we can remember how I said sometimes we just might ask a person, hey, how was your childhood? And we get that feeling, then that they had a really tough childhood. Then we could talk about education on ACEs and trauma. And then that person might, really start identifying with that. And we can bring up the conversation of counseling. So I think a lot of times people might be termed non-compliant, or they don't care when they've experienced trauma. And what action might they take? They don't keep appointments. They don't take their meds. We set goals. They go, oh, I didn't do those goals. And you're like, okay, well, what's going on? And it might be so easy for us to be judgmental and say, God, what is going on with that person? But if we just take a really deep breath and be mindful, so that's, as providers, sometimes we might be rushed or distracted. Take that deep breath and really hear that person and be present with them. You can pick up on a lot of things through their body language, what they say. Be curious, encourage collaboration. And from the class, the online course I took on becoming more trauma aware, they had some great ideas about how to ask questions about trauma that I want to share with you. And here's what you might say to somebody. In addition to the stresses of daily life, some people with diabetes might have experienced something particularly difficult or traumatic. We also know that experiencing violence is very common in many people's lives. I'm just wondering if there's anything like this you might want to talk about. Okay. I love that, right? So you're saying it happens to others. It's common. Would you want to talk about it? Opening up the conversation. That might be one way, like you could adopt that and modify it for you. Another way. Sometimes adults also have health issues if they experience things like abuse, neglect, or a family member with drug abuse or mental illness. If anything like that has happened to you, we have resources to help. Okay. And that might ring true for me. And I could actually say, something did happen and I want to talk about it. But honestly, some people may not disclose their histories when they're first asked. There's a lot of fear, right? Who knows what happened to them, but a perpetrator might have frightened them, like and not talking. They might have shared it with somebody else, and the provider said, "Well, we're here to talk about your, IBS. We're not here to talk about your trauma." They might be very ashamed or guilty about what happened to them, or they might think, "Why would I share my, childhood when I'm here for this other issue, my heart attack?" But it is vital. Having this conversation is vital. And the other thing, really important, I ask people this all the time: do you feel safe at home? Just kind of part of my intake question. And then, if they don't feel safe, or if I get kind of that feeling, well, maybe they're not safe, I'll say this clinic, this healthcare setting is a safe place for you. It's safe for you to share. We're here to help, letting them know. The thing about it is, ACEs are not destiny. Diabetes specialists can help interrupt intergenerational transmission of toxic stress. And as you know, I'm on my journey. And just because of my ACEs, it doesn't mean it's going to determine who I am. Heck no, right? I determine who I am. And so that's really important that we take back our power. With early detection and evidence-based intervention, we can transform health outcomes. Now, if you want to Google an amazing human, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, who is a first Surgeon General of California. She's done TED Talks. She's been interviewed many times, and she's talked about ACEs in all different ways. And I've learned so much from her, and their initiative in California is so amazing, because what we want to do is that you are not your ACE score. ACEs are not destiny. We want to promote resilience. Now, the clinical response when we identify toxic stress, what do we do with that information? We want to provide the principles of trauma-informed care, including establishing trust, safety, and collaborative decision-making. We want to also supplement with information on toxic stress and discuss strategies that can help regulate. So, people who've experienced toxic stress are often in a state of dysregulation, and and their body is completely inflamed, right? I mean, I always think about diabetes as a condition of inflammation. And so with toxic stress and chronic conditions in their body, there's a lot of inflammation and dysregulation. How do you get to regulation? Well, one of the most important ways is supportive relationships. So can they be part of a group or a book club or a support group, or can they get involved in their church or synagogue or place of worship? Supportive relationships where they feel safe are very healing. I can't say enough about sleep. I used to really not honor sleep. I used to say, "Oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead." That's what I used to say. And I'm like, girl, what were you thinking? I mean, sleep is so important for neuro health, for neuroplasticity, for our brain to recover. It's a critical part of coping. Nutrition. Hey, now I'm like in our wheelhouse, right? Diabetes specialist wheelhouse. We know about nutrition and the gut bacteria and the gut bacterial diversity and its impact on mental health. We know about physical activity, mindfulness, and meditation. I mean, we got to keep it simple, but apps are great. Can you walk out in nature and have moments of awe? Can you do some deep breathing when you're feeling that intense emotion, just to calm down that stress response? And then, of course, mental health care, including psychotherapy, psychiatric care, substance disorder, whatever that person is needing. But look what I love here. Number 3, validate their existing strengths and protective factors. Man, you have been through so much, and look how resilient you've been. you are, you're a warrior. I mean, I can't believe you've been through that, and look at you now. You're exercising on a regular basis, you're sleeping, you're really working hard on nutrition. Hearing that from their provider, from their diabetes specialist, is amazing. So they're going to internalize your voice. Oh yeah, I am pretty strong. Look what I have done. I'm not a loser. I'm a rock star. I don't know if you're going to, get that in one session, but our voice is very important. What we say, our words, what we convey to them has a lot of weight. So we can utilize that to help them toward healing. And then referrals to resources, social work, educational material, and we can send them to the ACE website and they could read more about it. Now, I'm getting excited because this is such great stuff. But when you go to ACEs Aware, there's an ACEs Aware self-care tool for adults. And this is what we can use. And that is when a person has experienced ACEs, their body may make more or less stress hormones than is healthy. The following tips can help you manage your stress response. And then it's like a goal setting sheet. Healthy relationships. I set a goal of what? Spending more time with loved ones, making time to see friends, connecting with people. And then there's their exercise goals. And then here's their mental health goals. This is downloadable and free, or you can fill it out on a computer. I'm going to learn more about mental health. I want to get, hook up with a professional. Here's the suicide prevention lifeline, crisis text line. Okay, wow. And then here's a bunch of excellent other resources. So we can share this with people. We can print it, give it out. It's free. It's available. It's ready to download. I can't believe how exciting that is. Okay, so mental health check. When we're working with people and we know they're really struggling with mental health, we can just say, hey, how are you doing today? Rate your mood from 1 to 10. Or what mental health symptoms are you experiencing? Do you know what the trigger was? What's taken up most of your headspace today? I mean, little questions to kind of help them explore where they're at and share it. How do you manage your triggers? And I love this one. People with diabetes beat themselves up. My blood sugar's too high. It's too low. I'm not checking my blood sugars enough. I didn't eat the right food. How can you show yourself the same compassion you show others? Oh, what an awesome question. Okay. Actions we can encourage that help buffer toxic stress response. In the center is the person. So this is going to revolve around them. We're going to say, hey, I want to work with you on this. Here's some things that have helped people who've experienced, toxic stress or adverse childhood experiences. Do any of these resonate with you that you'd like to start working on? Let's just start with one baby step. Maybe they try and get 6 hours of sleep. Our ability to encourage optimism and resilience, hardiness, to recognize it, to realize that even in this dry, cracked earth that has experienced temperatures over 100 for a month, a flower can bloom. I love this website, actionforhappiness.org. And I'm not saying that for somebody who's had adverse childhood experiences, tell them to do these things and they'll get better. But what I am saying is sometimes when that person is struggling to get back to a place of health, doing little things like this can just make them feel better, can get them outside of that pain for a little while. And this is a beautiful, very easy acronym to just bring up and say, hey, does any of these things sound to you like they would be helpful for you right now? Giving, doing things for others. It was so funny because my kid went to a swim meet today and I brought the burritos for the busload of kids. And I felt so great. I was like, wow, giving to others really does make you feel good. I was like buoyant all day because of that. Relating, exercising, appreciating, noticing the little things of the world around, trying new things. Like, what can we do? Can we learn a language that might be too big? Can we take a community college class? Can we just, learn how to knit? Can we learn how to cook something? Whatever. Direction, having a goal to look forward to really helps people keep moving forward. Resilience, take a positive approach if you can, helping people reframe things. Acceptance, hey, this is who I am. I'm going to really try and work on accepting myself and appreciating all of what and who I am and the gifts that I bring. And then being a part of something bigger. I mean, for me, being a part of this diabetes community is always very healing for me. Like, oh yeah, these are my peeps. I have a place. Now, I would encourage anyone who has lived with trauma or knows somebody with trauma, this book, What Happened to You, Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing with Dr. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. It's a conversational type of book, but very helpful information. And you can just kind of read the chapters that are most helpful for you. But they talk a lot about dysregulation of toxic stress and then getting back to regulation. But I just wanted to share these quotes from Oprah. The lesson is that no matter what has happened, you get a chance to rewrite the script. Look at the second one. I wouldn't be who I am without my trauma, so I own it. Nobody wants trauma, but it can really have an impact on our life and our life trajectory, and it might actually help with healing others in the future. I use my trauma in service to others. Empathy, compassion, and forgiveness. All of us who have been broken and scarred by trauma had the chance to turn those experiences into post-traumatic wisdom. Forgive yourself, forgive them, step out of your history and into the path of your future. Okay. Now, this is another quote I found on Facebook that I just had to share with you. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness in the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in the darkness for the light that is you. I really want to thank you for joining us today. Being trauma aware in our work setting with our relationships and ourselves is so powerful. And this is a site I keep talking about. There was a free training, ACEs Aware, and I put the URLs there, and I have a whole page of resources associated with this on my website and also on the online university. But this is where I got my initial training, and I've been reading and more about it. And I have this gal at the clinic I've been working with, and she really struggles with so many issues: houselessness, taking her meds, checking her blood sugar. But when I first met her, I just said, hey, how was your childhood? And she goes, oh my God, my childhood was horrible. I have an ACE score of 9. Nobody's ever asked me that before. And she was so excited that I was asking her about her childhood because she wanted to share it. Not that she wanted to go into detail, but she wanted to say it out loud and be recognized. And what she said is, I feel like someone actually cares what happened to me and is providing me with help and support. And I want to share that with you. I don't, when I, meet with her, talk to her on the phone, I'm not trying to fix any of that. I'm just listening, helping her with problem solving, being present with her. And that is such a huge gift. So I just wanted to, welcome you to join us on social media. I'm certainly going to be posting more about this as time goes on and we learn more. And I'm going to hang out and see if you have any questions. But I really want to thank you again, whether you're listening recorded or live, for being courageous enough to come and listen to this talk, for being present with it. And I'm sure it's evoked a lot of emotions for you. And I want to just allow space and room for that. And also, there's resources out there and lots of information that can help us take this information and move it forward. So I want to thank you so much. I'm going to press the stop recording button, but I will hang out and answer any questions. This is Beverly Tomasian signing off.